So AMD's Q4 earnings date is coming up in the 30th of January, and we can see that the stock has been just going up and up and up, and it's basically up, as you can see here. Over the last 12 full months, we are up almost 150%. And just year to date, so basically the first 3 weeks or so of this new year, we're already up somewhere around 26%. And this is like insane. I mean, 26% in 3 weeks is like what most people dream of for even a good year. So yeah, this is like, why is this happening? So let's have a look at it. Firstly, we can see that several analysts have increased their price target for AMD, and most of them are going from, like, let's say low to mid 100s to high and to high 100s, and even so in some cases $200. Now, you shouldn't always blindly follow these people, but I think one of them that you could have a look extra in this case is Mr. Hans Mossman at Rosenblatt, because he had a $200 price target for AMD even when we were basically in the trenches back in, let's say, late 2022, when the market looked dire and the inflation started to go up and all the stocks taking a hit, especially the tech stocks. Mr. Hans Mossman at Rosenblatt still stuck to the $200 target, and some people will basically say that he's not a serious analysis people, but again, in my opinion, I've been following him for 5-6 years on AMD, and I think he's a real serious guy, and I actually wouldn't be surprised to see him increase the price target now to 250 or 280, maybe even 300 in the quite near future. And why would he do that? Well, so let's have a look. If you've been following the AMD coverage, you can see that a lot of these companies are talking about AI, and I think AI is the main reason why this stocks has been going up quite lately. And in the AI market, you have these companies like Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, who are basically buying these AI hardware chips, these accelerators, GPU accelerators for AI workloads. And till this day, they only been buying NVIDIA's H100 and A100 previously, and coming also up B100 and B200 chips. So NVIDIA, especially in 2023, saw like an insane amount of growth on their data center revenue. And those are also with like absolutely insane margins. I'm talking like 60, 70, maybe in some cases even 80% gross margin for a hardware chip. This is also the reason why obviously NVIDIA has the market cap now that they have, 1.5 trillion. Although you could argue that at that point, you know, how much more growth is there to be in the stock price? I mean, yeah, they're almost at $600. So we'll have a look at AMD though more closely, and you can see that. So you can see that AMD's market cap is still quite big. I mean, it's not a small company, but they are nowhere near close to NVIDIA. And why would Apple and, you know, Meta and Microsoft and Alphabet and all these guys, and also a lot of smaller players, bet on AMD as well? Well, if you're Apple, you don't wanna like invest all your eggs in NVIDIA and make them the sole kingmaker in AI hardware. And these people, these companies, they are not happy about paying like $30,000 or $40,000. I mean, at some point in 2023, there were rumors of big companies buying H100 chips at least at $30,000-$40,000 each, and they don't want to pay this kind of high prices for NVIDIA, and also not basically giving the competition any chance, which at some point would lead to NVIDIA controlling the entire market. So this is where AMD comes into the picture, and we've seen over the entire last year a lot of rumors and industry insiders talking about the allocation of the TSMC manufacturing plant, and how much of those manufacturing capacities for AI chips are going to go to NVIDIA and how much to AMD. And again, now we are going into basically uncharted territory, because it's very difficult from the outside to know which of these rumors are correct and which are wrong, or maybe they are correct but they are over exaggerating, or they are like lowballing the figures. So again, at this point you have to take this with a pinch of salt. But in my opinion, it's getting interesting because, for example, this guy Dan Nistet, you should definitely follow him. He's a really good guy with lots of good information, in my opinion, in this market. So according to Dan, NVIDIA is going to manufacture around 1 million H100, H200s and other AI chips in 2024, and AMD's manufacturing capacity could go up to 600,000 MI300 derivatives. Now, a lot of industry insiders seem to think that NVIDIA's number could be well above 2 million units, We also heard previously that the share of TSMC CoWoS capacity, so CoWoS is chip on wafer on substrate, and it's basically how you make these huge AI chips. And they say that 80% of TSMC's capacity is going mainly to NVIDIA and AMD, of which 60 to 70% of those 80% from TSMC is going to NVIDIA, which leaves room for AMD to capture quite a bit of market from the rest of the companies out there. Now the interesting thing here is that AMD CEO Lisa Su on the last earnings report mentioned on a highly questioned MI300 numbers that basically the guideline on how much they expect to sell in 2024, and according to Lisa Su, they expect to sell $2 billion in MI300s for entire 2024. And I and a lot of people believe that this is a really conservative number from Lisa. She actually has a really good habit of basically under promise and over deliver quite a lot. So if the moment she said it, I could see that people's reaction following this market, that most people said that, yeah, this is probably lowballing. Now, if we look at this kind of information now, I think Lisa Su is lowballing this situation, and this also falls in line with another analysis from Barclays' Tom O'Malley, who recently mentioned that their awareness from the industry channel is that AMD will at least have 2x revenue compared to the number that Lisa Su mentioned. So Barclays analysis, they think that AMD will sell at least $4 billion in MI300s next year, and that would, yeah, obviously be twice the number that Lisa Su mentioned. And to be honest, even then, lots of people think that this is still way too conservative. So it's difficult to say. And if you're the analysis like from Barclays, Tom O'Malley, you probably wouldn't, like, if the numbers are, let's say, 4 billion, you probably would set 3 billion just to be on the safe side. So if he says actually 4 billion, it's probably closer to 5 or 6 even. But again, it's difficult to say, but I believe even 4 billion is too little. You also see that Mark Zuckerberg just a couple of days ago on his Instagram announced that they are gonna to buy 600,000 units of AI GPU accelerators, of which 350,000 of them are coming from NVIDIA. And then you are stuck with the question, so where is the rest coming? Basically, other half. Well, I mean, is there any other company offering these kind of solutions to the market? Of course, there's AMD. As we mentioned previously, Intel is also kind of starting to venture into this market, but they are not ready with their chips compared to NVIDIA and even AMD. So I think that's basically good indication that AMD most likely will have in the hundreds of thousands units, at least at the minimum. Now, are they gonna go into the millions? I don't know. It's very difficult to say. But if you remember my calculations from, let's say, a couple of months ago, so we know that TSMC's capacity for the manufacturing is basically, they said that they had 8,000 wafers per month by the summer of last year, 11,000 wafers roughly by end of last year, and they're gonna double or triple that capacity by end of this year. And we know that NVIDIA had a head start, so you can see that my estimations was roughly 4,000 wafers for NVIDIA and 50 for AMD at the time. And then NVIDIA again increasing to 6,000 wafers, and quite a nice increase for AMD. And then if we stay at these kind of numbers here just, so how many number of chips can NVIDIA make per number of wafer? So we can see that I just made a calculation. I took these numbers from AMD and NVIDIA's own webpage. I figured out the die size, so the size of the chip, which is 815mm for NVIDIA's H100, for example. And then AMD has another solution. They connect basically 8 smaller dies together to form the big die. And then, and then we could calculate the number of good dies per wafer using this calculator, which is basically taking into consideration manufacturing defects. So for H100, I think my estimation, at least, I'm not sure about this number, but I think it's in the same ballpark. Now, if it's 28 or 38 or 45, it's difficult to say, but let's say 34 good dice per wafer, and AMD would get 553 dice per wafer because they are smaller. But also if you make smaller wafers, it's a long story, but you make smaller wafers, smaller dies, you basically get a much better efficiency and less defects. So this is the reason why by the end of the day, given each wafer, AMD will get roughly 70 MI300s, whereas NVIDIA gets 34 H100s. So this is definitely a benefit for AMD's design. Basically, they decided to go for a they didn't go for a monolithic design like NVIDIA did. Instead, they make like 8 smaller chips and basically connect them together via different fancy rocket science technology. And at the end of the day, you gain basically manufacturing efficiency and hence cost savings compared to NVIDIA. But again, even despite those, like, the 2x numbers of chips coming out per wafer, we know that NVIDIA, they are just a bigger company, so they will at the end of the day have much more wafers anyways. But this will, so looking at these kind of calculations, I arrived at by Q4 2023, AMD would have 1200 wafers, and then I revised that number to 600 because I think I was way too overestimating that number in the beginning. And again, revising that number to the yellow line, you can see that I got roughly 40,000 chips per month. That's monthly number. So I think roughly thereabouts 40,000 chips per month. And this would give us roughly 600 million in revenue per month by end of last year. And again, it's difficult to say because if I recall, AMD kind of stated that in Q3 and Q4, the total addition of revenue from the AI hardware would be around 400 million, if I recall correctly from the earnings call. So it's at least in the same ballpark. It's difficult to say again, but yeah, so considering these kind of numbers, if they have like even increased this by just 50% throughout the entire 2024, we would be at something like 800 to 1 billion revenue per month. Maybe that's too high, so let's assume just 600 million revenue extra per month. That's 7.2 million additional revenue. And again, looking back at the number that the guy at Barclays said, Tom O'Malley, and he expects 4 billion. And Lisa Su said 2 billion. So that's why I think that Lisa Su is most likely giving a low estimation just in order to not get ahead of the, and don't get too much optimism out there. But this is something that we've seen her do, and this is also why I think, considering all this, I mean, if AMD managed to do this kind of execution, as long as NVIDIA has this kind of valuation at 1.5 trillion, I could definitely see AMD go up to 500 billion US dollar in market share, and obviously the stock price would go up at least 50% from here again. And that's not all, but this video was mainly looking at the AI point of view. But again, look at this. So we can see that Samsung launched their new chip, the Exynos 2400, featuring the Eclipse 940 GPU, which is built on what? AMD Adreno 3. So, and I mean, how many millions of phones is Samsung gonna sell? And how much royalties is AMD gonna get based on this deal, just alone this deal? Also saw the same like Tesla Cybertruck being using AMD's hardware in the infotainment system. So it's not only AI, and remember that. So yeah, sorry for a very long video again, but I think it was interesting and good to look at the updated numbers, why AMD and the stock has been going up so much. And this might be the reason. Maybe the market knows that this is actually happening as we speak. And looking at the industry insiders, it for sure looks like something's cooking basically. So yeah, thank you for watching, and please make sure to like the video. This helps me a lot, and if you're not subscribed, please subscribe, and see you in the next one.